Joseph's running away. He's scared. He's panting. He doesn't have his outer shirt on right now. Something bad just happened. And this bad thing that just happened might put him away and that might actually kill him. He has had a new family, a new charge of life. Things were going great, but within a second, he's lost it all. What happened? My name is Pastor Rob Bailey here at South Lake Church, and we're going through the story of Joseph, a message series where both small groups, as well as here on Sunday, looking at the life of Joseph. Last week we saw how Joseph, treated as the most loved of his brothers, was thrown in a cistern and sold away into slavery. And a reminder that as we talk about our faith, our relationship with God, how often terrible and bad things happen. And having that relationship does not mean bad things won't happen. But when they do, He is with you. Here we are continuing that story going through Joseph. And today I have been thinking about this for the past week. That this is a sermon for those watching online. Typically, if you go on YouTube, pastors will talk about this is a topic about dealing with sexual temptation. And yes, we'll talk about that and work through that. But really, this is a message about the temptation of what happens when bad things just happen to you. So let's think about that for a second. Who here likes to be forced to do work? That's why I ask your dad all the time to help out, because I know he loves it so much to be voluntold. Right? That's a term, right? Voluntold. In a sense, you are being volunteered to do work and told that's the right thing to do, but do you want to do it? No. And how often, when you're told to do it, do you go, I can't wait, and I'm excited to serve and help? Anybody else feel that way? We're going to not add that to the sermon. So, no, and I bring this up because as a kid, I can tell you, I told myself that when I became an adult, I would not force chores on my kids how much I didn't like it. Oh, I can tell you, if the good Lord does bless me someday with kids, and bless is an interesting word to use there, they'll have some chores. But while I had chores, one of the things we had to deal with up north, which we have here, because it feels like it happens all year, are leaves falling. It seems like in Houston, leaves fall pretty much 80% of the year. But up north, when they fall, they fall. And when you have a big yard, that's a lot of leaves. And I had to rake it, and for some reason I wasn't allowed to use the air blower. I had to rake it into piles. So I learned quickly that if I did a poor job at my work, my dad would get so frustrated, he would just take over. I'm going to get a phone call later because he's going to be like, I never did that. No, once or twice it worked. But once my dad realized this was my attitude to get out of work, guess what happened? He just let me out there, do it for a couple hours slowly, and just enjoyed watching football or did something else in the house. The point being is, did I have a good attitude serving? No. In fact, I'll give you one more example. I got a phone call one day. It was from my church saying, Robbie, we're so thankful that you signed up to help out with VBS. Wait, I signed up for what? Mom! Oh, Robbie, this would be perfect for you. I didn't ask for this. No, but this would be good for you. Again, do you think I walked in to help out with church with a grateful, humble heart? No. And I bring this up today because I guess I'm assuming for a lot of us, we have similar stories and thoughts. And it's not just being a kid, so no offense, and I hate to tell you kids, when you become adults, you're going to have some poor bosses. They're going to force you to do stuff. There will be ample opportunities to help serve other things. And here's a really scary thing. When you become an adult, They created this thing where you meet other coworkers to have fun at work. It's called mandatory fun time. So as an adult, you find a way to make fun aggravating, and you also want to be a part of it. So that's the fun adult world there. And I share this with you today because we're reading through Joseph. And what we don't get a sense of in our reading today is that Joseph now is a slave who has a master. What's his master's name? And Brett, nice job saying it, Potiphar. And we don't get a sense in our reading today, but we will later on in his story, is that Joseph is a slave under Potiphar for about 10 years. So imagine that, going from being the most beloved child of your family to now not just doing one task for a little bit forced to do, but for 10 years now, a slave. 10 years away from your family. 10 years of doing somebody else's bidding. I don't know about you, I can tell you, I would have a very negative attitude towards my work and my life situation. And again, I would suggest many of us, when we lose all that status, all those things that Joseph lost, it becomes very easy to then go through that life working, upset, mopey, asking God, where are you, and being frustrated. There's a temptation there to not see what God's doing in your life. So let's take a look at our reading right here. This is Genesis 39. So this is starting with verse 2. So the Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did, and he served in the home of the Egyptian master. And Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of the entire household and everything he owned. And from that day, Joseph was put in charge of his master's household, property, and the Lord began to bless Potiphar. Is Potiphar a believer in God? No. He's an Egyptian. He's part of the Egyptian religion. Yet, for some reason, God is blessing him, his household. Why? Because he has somebody in his household. Who? Joseph. And what's important here, hearing this story, the importance of when you're stuck, forced to work, that God blessed Joseph because Joseph had an awesome attitude about things. Is that what it says here? No. Did God bless Joseph because Joseph asked God, I need your help, so please make this work? No. Well, why did God bless him? We don't know. God just did it. And as God worked through Joseph, Joseph worked and did many great things. So much so, he went from being a little slave boy to the in charge of the entire household. And Potiphar saw God working through him. Myself and my struggles, and why this hit home for me this week, is that I've experienced now what happens when you do have a poor boss or bosses. And I can tell you, when I was upset, I was frustrated, I was angry, I failed. I failed in how I received it. I failed how I lived it out. And the difference between myself and Joseph here is when Joseph was under as a slave, he allowed God to work through all of it. He didn't let his emotions keep him from serving the household. His emotions did not keep him from keeping God doing what God needed to do. And thinking about how Joseph reacted in his situation boggles my mind. Because it's easy to be tempted to say, woe is me, and I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to do what I can to undermine my master. That's not what Joseph did. But something happens. All this good, and if you haven't noticed the story of Joseph, good things happen, and then bad things also happen. But then good things happen. There's this flow. And here it comes. So Joseph, now that he's been there for now going over 10 years, has grown up, starting to become a young man, is very handsome and well built. And actually another translation is goodly, is how they think the King James does it. Goodly is how they worded this. And as he's goodly, as he's handsome, Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. "Come sleep with me," she demanded. But Joseph refused. "Look," he told her, "my master," actually I'm going to stop there for a second. So Potiphar's wife starts seeing how handsome he is, seeing how God is blessing him, and says, "Sleep with me." And for us adults, when we talk about and deal with things like sexual temptation and thoughts and desires, most of the time it has nothing to do with the actual act. It typically has to do with power and hurt. What I believe here is that Potiphar's wife is seeing how handsome Joseph is, and she commands him, "Come lie with me." And what does Joseph do? He refuses. And what that tells me is that Potiphar's wife did not have the power to give that command over Joseph. If she had it, which she could, and he refused, what could she have done right then and there? Brought him up on charges for not listening to her master. What I think is going on here is Potiphar's wife is seeing that she doesn't have power and doing what she can to entice it, trying to influence Joseph to have that over him. And it's not just about sexual desires with this, and this is the other type of temptation we can get. Does anybody here hang out with friends where sometimes they entice you to go do things you might get in trouble for? There's so many comments on that one right there. We giggle and laugh because the answer is we do know people, don't we? And for some of them, these are our buddies that we love getting in trouble with. But the problem is these friends of ours, the reason why they're enticing you to do something wrong, they want to see if they have the power to influence you, to convince you to do something that you know you shouldn't do. And that's important reading this story because it's easy to say, well, if I'm not dealing with this problem, I can go past this story. But the temptation here is when people start to try to influence you, have power over you, it is easy to fall for it. But how does Joseph respond? He told her, "My master trusts me with everything in the entire household. No one here has more authority than me. He has held back nothing from me except you because you are his wife. How could I do such a thing, such a wicked thing? It would be the greatest sin against God." So Joseph's response to this temptation is that I'm given all this responsibility from my master. Why on earth would I do something against him? But the key thing here is that the person he's most afraid of offending, the master. No. He calls upon God. And what's interesting here, I love the NLT, this is a New Living Translation for reading and teaching, but there's a few times I wish they would change a couple things. He doesn't say sin against God, he says, and if you have an ESV or King James, Lord. And the reason why they use the word Lord there is because what he really says is, it would be a great sin against Yahweh, the name of God. There's only a couple times in the entire book of Genesis where they use the word Yahweh for God. Why would Joseph say that? Because I believe Joseph had a relationship with his God. And he realized this sin, this temptation, wouldn't just be an evil against his master, it would be evil against his relationship with God. And I have to give props to Joseph here because he understood those hard temptations and works he's under. Who do they truly reflect on? Does it reflect on him? Yeah. Does it reflect on Potiphar, his master? Yeah. But truly, who does it actually reflect on? God. which means if you said Jesus, it's okay, that works too. When we do the things we do, deal with the things we do, it's important to remember where God fits and plays with this. I share with you how I have struggled doing hard work and being tempted and sharing my frustration, my hurt, and my aggravation with my masters. And was I right to be upset? I would say yes. But what I was wrong is my actions or my reactions had a negative effect on my relationship with my God. And that's where Joseph steps up and shares this. So as your friends are tempting you and encouraging you and kind of teasing you to go do something that might go against your parents, that might go against your team, it's important to share like, hey, I love my parents. I love my teachers. But I love my God. And I love him so much that I don't want to do this. That's what Joseph is saying to Potiphar's wife. But then she kept pursuing on Joseph day after day. And he refused to sleep with her, and he kept out of her way as much as possible. So again, I told you this is over a 10-year period. This isn't like a couple weeks ago, Potiphar's wife just went, handsome boy, let's see what I can do. There's a good chance this has been going on a while. Her again and again and again tempting him. But one day, all the guards were out of the house. She grabbed him by his cloak, and when Joseph realized what was happening, what'd he do? He ran. Again, a fault of Pastor Rob is when you get into temptation, there are times where you get so upset, so stuck in that situation, you simply say, let's just deal with it. I've gone this far, I'm stuck. Does Joseph say, well, I'm in this situation now and I'm stuck? What does he do? He runs. In the middle of that temptation, in the middle of the possibilities that could happen, he ran. And what's really, again, I love about reading the story of Joseph is by him running away, who is he serving? God, but then below him would be also his master. So whether trapped in the service of a slave for the last 10 years or trapped in the grasp of somebody wanting him to sin, Joseph continued to serve his actual master and his God. As you look through this message, it's easy to see these things and be like, okay, great, I'm not dealing with that. Nobody's grabbed on my cloak lately. I'm not, in any major conversations or searching stuff. But it's amazing when people tempt you again and again and again. And as you speak up and share your faith, eventually it's easy to fall into temptation. And sometimes the mistake we make as Christians, when we have somebody trying to pressure us, have somebody trying to do something that we say, we're sharing the gospel, no, we're not going to do this, it's going to be okay. Our willpower can and does fail. And when we are in a situation like Joseph, stuck, and again, this is not in his control, right? This is somebody else pressuring him again and again. It is very possible to fall into temptation. I want to share with you, for those who are online who have our app open, I have two sections of verses here. One of them is a classic thing, is from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Paul, writing to the church, talks about temptation. These verses have been used a lot talking about not temptation, but struggles in life, and misquoted. So I want to share with you what Paul has to say to reflect on what Joseph is doing. And don't grumble as some of them did and were destroyed by the angel of death. And this is talking about the people with Moses. Things happened to them, for example, of us. They were written down to warn us. So if you think you are standing strong, be careful not to fall. So that's verse 12. When you are being tempted, when your friends are asking you to do things, there's things you're watching, seeing, or conversations with others, it's really easy to say, I've got everything under control. I'm not going to fall. But what are Paul's words? Be careful for those who feel like they are standing strong. Be careful that you don't fall. The temptations in your life are no different from others' experiences. And God is faithful. He will not allow temptation to be more than you can stand, which is a phrase a lot of people use all the time. But I want you to hear this again. What Paul says is, those struggles that you are dealing with, facing, they're not minor details, but it's also not the end of the world. Because what you are struggling with, others are struggling too. Again, reading from the story of Joseph. It sounds like it's really easy just to talk about having some woman tempt you to go sleep with you. No, I'm not going to make a comment on that. It's easy to be like, well, that's not in my life. But we do have in our life our people tempting us to do other things again and again. And hearing the encouragement of Paul is, that's something that we all deal with. You are not alone. You are not by yourself. So because of that, God will not allow the temptations to be more than you can stand. But here's the question I have to ask when we hear that verse. Are there temptations that we feel like we cannot resist? And I'll do it. Yes. So when you face that temptation, because this just said you won't face it, but if you do face it, here's what Paul continues to say. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. So that, my dear friends, flee from the worship of idols. So what Paul's encouraging his church about temptation is that when you do face it, when you have that struggle, ask God, where are you working through to help me get out of this? Because I'm about to fail. I'm about to struggle through it. When we reflect on the life of Joseph, he had, in a sense, she had him in his hands. So what was his only option to do? He ran. He went the way out. And the reason we bring that up, because it's easy to not run and just go through what was going to happen. Instead, he fled. When we talk about temptation, it's easy to look at this and think, man, that's cool. I'm not Joseph. How do we handle this? Our Lord Jesus struggled and worked through temptation. We hear that through his entire life. We hear that through his temptations with the devil in the desert. We see multiple times people begging him to do works when they just wanted to see him do it, and he said no. And the verses I have here, for those who are following through, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and the night he was going to be betrayed, he was praying with God. And he asked his Father, Father, take this cup from me. I know what I'm about to go through. I am scared. If there's another way, let it go. But if this is your will, I will go forward with it. I share this with you because even Jesus had a conversation with his Father. And that conversation led to him giving his life for you and for me. Are there times where we fall into temptation? Yes. And our God said, I am sending my Son so that you know that you are loved and you're forgiven. But take heart when you face those difficulties, when you face those friends who are speaking in the side of your ear, who are trying to take you away from things. I will have a way out for you, and I love you. But the end of the story, if we were to keep reading, guess what happens to Joseph? He runs, but where does he find himself? Locked up in prison. And that'll be our message next week, but my encouragement for you hearing this whole story is, he's accused of rape. He's accused of a sexual sin against a wife of an official. He's a slave. Guess what the actual punishment for such an offense is? Death. So the question becomes, why did they not kill him? And some of the suggestions from some pastors and reading through this is that Potiphar's anger, yes, towards Joseph, was probably just as much towards his wife. And because of God's mercy, God's love, God's working through his life, Potiphar had mercy on Joseph. Which means as he had his way out, his story will continue. And that's my message for you today. With the death of our Lord Jesus, but his resurrection, we know and we have the mercy of our Lord. Does that mean bad things will still happen to us? Absolutely. But that doesn't stop his love in your life, and it doesn't stop the love we have with others. And the cool thing and the hard thing at times can be when we experience other people in our lives who fall in temptation, that we have an opportunity to share that love and mercy with them. So as you go throughout this week, as conversations happen, as friends talk to you, as things happen at work that make you frustrated and tempted to do things that you know you probably shouldn't do, know that you have a God who continues to be with you, like with Joseph, who loves you and gave his life for you. Amen.